Hello, everyone. My name is Justice, and welcome back to YCR's Food for Thought series. For those of you who are just seeing YCR for the first time, we are an advocacy group made by students and young professionals for students and young professionals who believe that Canada can have a strong future in resources, the economy, and the environment. Please connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at YC Resources if you want to learn more about what we do. In addition, please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A box below. So before introducing our speaker for today, I'd just like to first let my two co-hosts introduce themselves. So whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Lily Peterson. So I've been with YCR for a little over a year now. I studied journalism at SAIT until 2019. And so now I do all of the Indigenous outreach. I'm part of the Cowessess Nation in Saskatchewan. And I'm really excited to meet you today, Randy.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Camilla Fredette. I am a student in environmental sciences at University of Sherbrooke. I am from Quebec, and I am the sustainability coordinator at YCR, and I'm super excited to hear what you have to say today.
Yep.
Awesome, fantastic. So obviously today we are pleased to welcome Randy Fournier. Randy is an accomplished forest products industry executive with 29 years of leadership success and strategic drive to sustainably maximize the value of Canada's great renewable natural resource, which is trees. In 2022, Randy took his passion for the socio-economic importance of trees and joined PRT Growing Services Ltd as Chief Executive Officer to lead their next phase of growth towards becoming North America's undisputed leader in forest seedling production to supply the solution of choice to both the forest products industry and climate mitigation market. Mr. Fournier received his Bachelor of Science and Master of Business Administration degrees from the University of Ottawa, and we're pleased to welcome him to Food for Thought today. So welcome, Randy, and yeah, I'll let you take it away here.
Thank you very much, Justice, and the rest of your colleagues. Appreciate the intro. Thank you also for the invitation opportunities. We were chatting a bit offline. I recognize this week is final exam week, so not exactly a prime spot for student audiences. So I thank those that are in attendance and those that are listening in later, and wish everyone the best of luck with their studies. As Justice mentioned, a career built around forest products. I'm a Northern Ontario native. Born and raised, and throughout my career, worked basically coast to coast and offshore within the forest products industry. 13 years in the province of Quebec at one point. So I can honestly say that I've got to see everything that Canada has to offer, and it's just been beyond phenomenal. What I'd like to do today, in having the opportunity to speak to students and future leaders for our industry and for the nation, is speak a little bit about our company, PRT Growing Services. We are the largest producer of forest seedlings in North America. I'd like to touch a little bit on my personal passion, for Canada's world-leading renewable natural resource stewardship and our place in the forest products industry, and the place that we represent in climate change mitigation in terms of what our nation is capable of and what we've already achieved. And lastly, I'll look at closing off by just discussing what I consider to be some tremendous opportunities and material careers awaiting the youth that are currently in university with their studies and graduating within the forest products industry and what it has to offer. With that, I will just simply move into to our company. PRT Growing Services, as I mentioned, is North America's largest producer of forest seedlings. So if you can imagine, we have a job where we produce and grow baby trees. So this is not this is not something where you sit back and you have to look at and say, what is it you do or how do you do it? We literally produce baby trees. We help Mother Nature along with the reforestation of North America. We've recently completed a monumental transaction just a couple of weeks back, and where we acquired another very successful company in the southeast of the United States. So basically, we have as an overall footprint, it's 28 different forest seedling nurseries across North America, 14 different seed orchards to provide the raw materials. And we basically go from the Pacific to the Atlantic, north to south, and cover the needs of the working forest and the forest products companies, and that of our climate partners in the battle against climate change. When I say we're the leading forest seedling producer, just for perspective, our company will produce 630 million seedlings a year. That is the capacity of our combined company. It sounds like a big number, but to put it in perspective, it means that we would have the capability to plant every acre of Prince Edward Island in about 15 months. It is, it's that order of magnitude when you sit back and try to have an appreciation for the amount of reforestation that takes place every year in North America. Big part of our company's endeavors, and we operate safely, and we definitely operate with a point of view, but people ahead of production. I give the production stats simply to give the context, but at the end of the day, when you look at our company, an amazing company of amazing people, we're doing what they love, and that is, creating, the future forest for tomorrow and generations to come. I've used the term a couple times here in terms of the working forest. When you look at our place, we supply the forest products industry across North America. We also supply, those participants that are battling climate change and the climate mitigation market. When you think of forestry, you need to think of it, in my view, and this is where my pride comes from. I look at it in the lens that this is the world's greatest renewable resource. It's the greatest renewable industry that we have on the planet. The reality is the tree represents the opportunity when done, when managed and harvested sustainably. It represents a resource that will come back generation after generation after generation. It's unfortunate at times in Canada and globally that the responsible and sustainably produced natural resources, do get let's say unfairly viewed or sort of have a bad image. It is really a misguided, out-of-date perception that is somewhat ingrained. At times it gets promoted, but at the end of the day, part of what our discussion today will be is around the responsible, sustainable forest products industry that we have here in Canada and how it provides the benefits both economically, socially, and environmentally, both here at home and around the globe. If you think in terms of humans and climate change and impact, the very simple human evolution required the basics. It required food and it required shelter. And the reality is, today's working forests, operated and managed responsibly by Canadian forest products companies, provides the lumber and the wood products that society requires to construct homes, basic shelter. When you think of sustainable harvesting, you think of sustainable reforestation, the message I like to have people reflect upon is that forestry is more analogous to responsible agricultural, analogous to growing a food crop, for example, for society. It's something that is renewable. It is something that, when done correctly, will come back time and time again and provide those benefits. When you think about when we go to market with our products, we're basically providing back the seedlings that become, the future generation's crops. When we think in terms of the working forest, our customers within the Canadian forest products industry, well, they sustainably operate the forest, and they typically do this under internationally recognized stewardship standards. The acronyms would be FSC for the Forest Stewardship Council or SFI for Sustainable Forestry Initiative. That is just a simple way of saying the Canadian industry, the North American industry, I can say with these, operates under a level of stewardship rules and regulations that ensures that what we do as an industry is meant to be there for generations and centuries to come. It's not meant to be go in, cut, and never show up again. It really is about building a long-term socioeconomic balance to the benefit of society and climate. When we think in terms of wood, again, I was earlier when I was saying about shelter and building products, wood is a natural, renewable resource. Modern forest management standards demand that accountable, sustainable practices are in place. So when you think of the harvesting of trees and you think of what that means in terms of the socioeconomic balance, wood as a building product, if you think of wood in comparison to, say, steel or concrete, very, very different profiles when it comes to carbon footprint, carbon impact. At the end of the day, wood is significantly almost beneficial would not be the right word, is significantly less impactful than what you would have through steel or concrete. Now, that's not to say steel and concrete do not have their place. That's not to say steel or concrete is bad. What it is to say is that they both have their place in society, in construction and application. But when you look at the CO2 challenges that, say, the steel and concrete industry have in terms of their inherent production processes, they do tend to liberate significantly more carbon dioxide than what you would have from a wood-based business. And thus, when I look back, and I always say with pride in the forest products industry, I look at wood as a renewable natural resource, but I also look at it as the best means by which we can propel society forward is by incorporating wood more into what we do through construction and other products. If you think in terms of the obvious applications in terms of lumber, home building, etc., that that in itself most folks can realize. But we also have customers and segments in the industry that have just advanced things tremendously within engineered wood products and the mass timber market. And basically, this is a market where you take traditional dimensional lumber or traditional dimensional products, build them up, glue them together, and put them into a scale and size where they replicate and have the performance standards of, say, steel beams. And it allows, and you'll see through construction on some of the university sites, and I'm sure some of you are attending, you start to see more and more wood structures going up, multi-story buildings used for office space, used for classroom space, utilizing wood, where in the past it would have been concrete. This is just my long-winded way of saying, when we look at the forest products industry as a sustainable part of sustainable key part of the green economy, it is that place that it takes and allows us to propel ourselves forward here into a lower carbon impact future. In addition to lumber, when you consider what the forest can yield, it is absolutely incredible the amount of bio-derived products that a tree is capable to provide. Earlier in my career, I was blessed on a few opportunities, but blessed to operate a chemical products group within a forest products company. And basically, our group had responsibility for the rest of the tree, everything that you don't see in terms of lumber products or wood products. So some of the clothes you're wearing today, if you look at the tags, you'll see the word rayon. Well, rayon is actually a fiber that starts off as a piece of cellulose that came from a tree. If you think of the automobiles that you drive, or the city transit that you may have taken to get to class today or to head out, in the tires there's a component called carbon black. Carbon black is just a chemical component that's there to improve the durability of tires, help with heat dispersion, and basically allow modern tires to perform. Well, within carbon black, there's a component that is derived from trees called lignin. It's the other half of the tree, if you would. If you can imagine a tree, it's a bunch of cellulose fibers. It's 50% of the tree. The other 50% is the glue that holds that together. Is pretty much what's called lignin. Carbon black is just one of the products globally that's able to use derivative from a wood byproduct into an everyday application such as car tires. In my past life, we also fermented the residual sugars that would come from a tree after you produce pulp for different products like paper or even rayon for clothing. And the ethanol we produce would actually go into the food industry. So there's a good chance that somewhere along the way in your lifetimes that the vinegar that you may have put on your French fries may have actually been derived from ethanol that was produced from the byproduct of a tree. One of the most famous soft drinks out there within its secret recipe actually used wood-based ethanol in order to produce the flavoring for the soft drink. And I am emphasizing wood-based ethanol for any chemical engineers that are on the call. It's not methanol, it is ethanol. But it's just to sit back and let you know that when you think of a tree, the lumber's the obvious, but it's incredible that nothing need go to waste. At the end of the day, the whole tree has value, and there's whole value within the tree. Society and science has come up, and this will become more and more prevalent in markets as the industry continues to propel forward. We keep speaking of wood, but at the end of the day, it all starts with a tree. And as I've said earlier, trees represent the greatest renewable resource that we have. It's critical to the world and the globe's endeavor for a lower carbon economy. It's critical. The sustainability of trees and societal benefit is something that represents both economic opportunity for communities and families, but it does also assist with climate change and the mitigation of climate change for the planet. When you think of trees, I always sit back and the simplicity of it is we look up and we say there's a tree. But the reality is what a tree represents is it represents the most cost-effective, scientifically proven means to sequester carbon. That's just the simple reality. There are companies out there that are funding tremendous projects where they're trying to capture carbon from the air and sequester it. I think Bill Gates and his efforts with direct carbon capture. You have other companies out there like Shell who are doing tremendous work with their Quest project, where they basically take carbon, CO2 residuals and off gas, sequester that by high pressure underground, and permanently store it. These are all very noble and worthy means to fight the battle on climate change and sequester carbon dioxide. But when you come right down to it, the science and evolution of the planet, the tree still remains the most scientific proven, most effective means to bring carbon from the atmosphere, tie it up into a means where it's no longer harmful from a warming agent for the planet, and actually provides, as I said earlier, socio-economic benefit in many applications. What we've seen, at PRT, and since I've joined the company, we have seen increasingly more and more customers and opportunities looking for how do we get in, how do we put incremental trees into acreage with a viewpoint towards, let's take more carbon from the air. Let's do that through greater abundance of forests and natural biology to pull some of this excess of CO2 that accumulates. One of the things that we look at in doing this is, and we've been working with different advocacy groups and internally, but it's the whole notion that the working forest provides a constant renewal and use. So as you build a home, that carbon stays sequestered for hundreds of years. Long after that home may end up demolished, versus the tree just simply dying in the forest and going through the natural regenerative cycle. What you do with a level of acreage within the working forest by constantly renewing it, you always ensure that you're sequestering more and more CO2 over a period of time on a given acreage. But when we think in terms of climate change, in this sense, we do look for opportunities where we can create new permanent sequestrations of carbon through afforestation efforts. Afforestation basically means returning forests to an area that doesn't have forest. Maybe it was forested 500 years ago and went to farmland, and the farm has long been abandoned and it's now just fallow land. It could be something as reclamation of, say, a closed mining site, or perhaps surplus government lands that no longer have application. Afforestation is really about reintroducing trees into an area where they have long ago were removed, and bringing them back into service. We also look at opportunities around new trees and new permanents, weather and disaster impacted lands, wildfires, hurricanes, etc. These are more immediate. These are more short-term. Suddenly you have a problem, now needs a solution. These are additional areas that we look at in terms of how do we gain opportunities with our customers and even ourselves to go in and restore these lands and bring them back to a natural setting, an artificial setting. Speaking of settings, urban settings, you'll likely see, for those of you that are studying in some of the larger Canadian centers and certainly in the US, there is a greater impetus these days to bring trees back to urban parks, back to urban roadways. The benefit of shade in terms of heat and society, just in terms of a walk through the woods feels pretty good. And if you think back to COVID, when we really couldn't do anything, the ability to get outside was not just refreshing; it was also therapeutic in terms of you change your mind, change the air. And trees have a big part of this, and a lot of urban settings are starting to realize that in expanding their use of trees in their planning models and how to go forward. All this to say that these are different efforts to return more trees into societal use, with the view towards the tertiary benefit of capturing additional carbon, but also providing environmental remediation, increased biodiversity, and as I've said, just societal health in terms of the ability to get out and walk in the woods. When I look at it through PRT's eyes, what we've now embarked upon and endeavored to achieve is to embrace the lower carbon economy that's coming. I shouldn't say coming, that is developing. And how do we get more involved with that through nature-based solutions? How do we go forward and bring ourselves additional benefits for the communities that we operate, or the regions in which we operate, through the supply and service and maintenance of trees and forests? We've not launched any projects of note to date. There's no major announcements, but we are making progress on both sides of the border. And that progress is basically looking at areas that today may be grasslands or underutilized acreage, where the carbon storage capacity is such that we could bring it to a whole different level by partnering with like-minded folks or communities in terms of how do we do that. It is a bit of a journey, But at the end of the day, what it becomes a balance act. It's really a balancing act between the planet, protecting the planet, climate change, etc., but also recognizing that to sustainably do so, you manage your acreage in a sustainable way, and that is to always have trees either present or in a state of renewal and growing. So when we look at climate change, we look at going into new areas, the one thing that we try to endeavor to ensure that folks understand, and definitely look at a younger audience such as this, the notion of a sustainable forest management. What that really does mean is using the acreage, using the trees. If you're harvesting the trees, the replenishment, putting back more than you remove, but in a manner where it's done, where you basically work with Mother Nature to speed up the regenerative cycle. So basically more carbon sequestered per acre over time. And if I was to stretch it out perpetually over time, it's the same acre. You end up with a situation where you're able to sit back and say, this is something where we're creating. So with that, I would sit back and say that's a positive nod towards the long-term benefits of working forest under sustainable standards. When I hit, sorry, I just got a glitch here where it said the internet kicked out, but you kicked back in, thankfully. So lastly, I guess the last piece I would put out is when we sit back and talk in terms of permanence and this new acreage that comes on and what it means in terms of the forest products industry, there's the balance. And part of the things that we are trying to work on behind the scenes, whether it be with government, industry, or like-minded groups, is find the opportunities to balance, conservation and long-term protection in a mechanism where if we're able to be a participant or someone that can assist with, the protection of, say, a unit of land, is there a way to create conditions where we can create 2 or 3 new units of land with additional incremental trees on it? And this is when I think of British Columbia, where we have 12 of our operations. If you just think to the amount of wildfires that went through there a few years ago that you may have seen on the news, or you think of what you may have read over the years of something called the mountain pine beetle. It's about a decade ago, but the reality is, BC underwent a very severe shock and infestation that really, the course of a decade, obliterated a good proportion of BC forest. These are the types of areas when you speak of afforestation and opportunities that are out there. These are the sort of areas where we are looking towards to say, how can we help? How can we help our customers in the working force who this would have been their harvest lands? How can we help, the Mother Nature itself require from us? To wrap it up, what I would offer is to the students that are listening is that, as I said earlier, forestry often gets a misguided but outdated perception of people. This was just meant to be a quick snapshot that a tree being harvested is not a bad thing. A tree being harvested sustainably, managed properly, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for society to get better, greener building products that it requires. It's an opportunity to continue to regenerate and utilize the land to the maximum capacity that we can, at the same time sequestering carbon. And really, Canadians need to reflect and should be very proud about how trees, our greatest natural renewable resource, are sustainably managed by our industry. I often say to folks, stop apologizing, start being positive about how we go about managing our forests, and embrace our position as world leaders in the management of Canadian forests. I sit back and use an example such as Finland and Sweden. These are 2 countries with very strong social reputations, strong social responsibility in the world, and they are absolutely built a forest products industry around a very sustainable working model that does make proper use in an environmentally sensible way of their lands and the use of forests. With that, I would sit back and say this is an industry, and this is going to be the plug for the industry that I hope more young people will take a look at, more young people to take a look and aspire to join. At the end of the day, it creates a level of benefit for society, the economy, and the environment. And it is something that most people look at and don't realize what is there. It gets over criticized, underappreciated, but I believe that's because it's just not understood well enough. For the engineers that are on the call, for the communication specialists, the technicians, business graduates, legal graduates, accounting graduates, these are all careers within the forest products industry. These are all very well compensated careers within the forest products industry. These are things that I strongly advocate, take a look at, become a part of what is a tremendous part of Canada's GDP. And for those that are still in school and we have not wrapped up studies and working towards graduation, a few years to go, the seasonal employment opportunities within the forest products industry are second to none. Whether it's tree planting out in the wilderness or working in a nursery, trust me, it beats retail. It is absolutely an opportunity to contribute positively, and be rewarded accordingly. So with that, I would sit back and say, if you find a career that involves a baby tree or a mature tree and be able to contribute to the plant economy, I would strongly advise you to give it a good, strong look and consider us for your go forward. Justice, I will turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy. That was a great summary at the end there to kind of give us all a bit of perspective. It's a lot better to work with trees outside in the summer than it is to work inside at a retail store. So I think that's a great point too. And also I really enjoyed sort of giving that new perspective on sometimes, it's not a bad thing to harvest trees. Having more wood products harvested actually can be a good thing for the climate if done, in a responsible way where you're replacing those trees and still using those products on a daily basis. So I think that's a really interesting perspective that I think not a lot of people, especially young people, consider when they look at, the forestry industry and what it kind of does to sort of store and sequester carbon in sort of in a natural way. So I appreciate all your insight in this presentation, and I think we'll get right into the Q&A.